Hello from Blue Willow Bookshop in Houston, Texas. I am Kathy Berner, the event coordinator at the shop. We are so excited to be here with you to host this virtual event with Jenny Holiday and Robin Lefler to celebrate their new books, Earl's Trip and Not How I Pictured It. So please join me in welcoming Jenny and Robin to the screen.
Hi.
Hey y'all, how are ya?
Great. How are you?
We are great. And before I say anything else, happy Pub Day Eve.
Thank you.
We're very excited for both of you, and we're very excited to have both of these books at the shop. To get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your newest book? Let's start with you, Robin.
So, Not How I Pictured It is about our main character, Ness Larkin, who is in her early 40s. And when she was in her late teens, early 20s, she was on an OC 90210 style show called Ocean Views. She ends up leaving Hollywood quite abruptly. And then 20 years later, the show gets a reboot. And so she decides that that's the closest she's ever going to get to her kind of sliding doors moment to get a do-over. Um, Unfortunately, when they go to shoot the first episode in the Bahamas, they are shipwrecked. And she finds herself on a deserted island with her first love, her ex-best friend who may want to kill her, and a bunch of people with just no survival skills.
That is perfect. How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, Earl's Trip is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is about a group of Earl friends who go on a annual trip together. Um, the trip is about to start at the beginning of the book, and they are in kind of true Jane Austen style, not that I'm comparing myself to Jane Austen, are sidetracked by the need to rescue a childhood friend from an ill-fated marriage. And that woman is in turn being rescued by her sister. So there's sort of a comic chain of rescuing that happens at the very beginning of the book, which results in the Earl's Trip being crashed by the ladies.
That's fantastic. So, Jenny, let's start with you. What was the germ of the idea for this?
You can actually go back on Twitter and find me years ago asking somebody else to write this book, kind of jokingly tagging a few of my friends. This was back in like the heyday of Twitter. Because the title had just popped into my mind, Earl's Trip. I thought
A
the
great
idea of a
title.
girl's trip translated onto a bunch of Earls would be funny. But nobody bit. You know, they always say you're not supposed to put your ideas out on social media because somebody might steal them. But I was saying, please, somebody steal this idea. And nobody did. This was years ago. And it kind of just percolated in my head until um, one until the pandemic. This was my pandemic book. And I had two kind of TV related experiences that came together in a perfect storm and kind of prompted me to actually write the book myself. One was Ted Lasso. I was late to the Ted Lasso bandwagon, but I watched the show and, like everybody else, was charmed by it in general, but particularly about Ted and his brand of kind of non-toxic masculinity
Yes.
boyfriends who were so supportive of each other. And that's the idea that I had for my Earls. And, you know, we can talk about this later if people want to, but the book is very, I mean, some people will call it anachronistic because it isn't very realistic in terms of several things, but the emotional intelligence of the men is probably one of those things. But I decided to just lean into it. And the other was Bridgerton. I loved there was a moment in Bridgerton, I can't remember specifically where they're at a ball and you realize that the orchestra is playing a Madonna song. And it gave
Yes.
me a little frisson of, oh my gosh, I love this. So that kind of also opened the idea of just sort of leaning into, I worked really hard to make the story historically accurate, but the sensibility that the story is framed by and that the individual chapters are named is very modern. And I kind of decided to lean into that unapologetically. So I had my two TV inspirations for this book.
I love that. So, Robin, how about you? What was the germ of the idea for you?
So, And on the route that I usually go, one of my neighbors has, it's this old, like not old, but 80s mint green Jaguar in the driveway. And I just had so many questions. Like, it's pristine. And I was like, what? Like, is this a newer purchase? Have you had it for forever? And so from that, I started thinking about making up my own story about where it came from. And then my brain took a leap to a woman whose father was her manager in her showbiz era and then took off, but left her his car. And so she would be very conflicted about the car. The car never made it into the book, but that's where it started. And then from there, once I had my main character, I really just was trying to figure out the worst possible situation to put her in. And I thought being trapped on an island with your coworkers with whom you have a really angsty past is just like one of the worst things
Yeah.
I could imagine for myself. So probably be bad for her too.
So thinking about both of your books, these are not traditional realistic fiction rom-coms. So did you have to do some research? I mean, Jenny, you said you work to keep it historically accurate with a more modern sensibility. And then Robin, I mean, did you have to research survival techniques?
Not so much because they don't really know what's going on. So it was fine if I didn't. The research I had to do was more like, how would you realistically disable a boat so that they couldn't communicate? What kind of birds live in the Bahamas?
Woo, birds.
Birds. Like what fish would they catch? That kind of stuff. But it's a fictional island as well, so there's some leniency there.
Yeah. And Jenny, how about you? How about with your research?
Yeah, when I say this book is unapologetically modern in its sensibility, that is true, but it is also a Regency set romance, which required a lot of research in terms of just accuracy of place, accuracy of, how to get from one place to another. One of my pet peeves about Regency writing is it takes so bloody long to get everywhere, and it doesn't necessarily work for your story. Like, now we're going to go here, but it's going to take 2 weeks.
Yep.
So things like that. The second book is coming out a year and a bit from now, and that one required so much research that I actually went to the place in question. So yeah, the historical books are a lot more research intensive than what I usually do, which is contemporaries.
Can you say where you went?
Yeah, the second book takes place mostly in Brighton.
Nice.
The earls go to visit the royal pavilion, which was the royal palace that had
Yeah.
many lives, but was kind of at its heyday during the time period that the second book takes place.
Oh, that's so great. So Caroline, so for the audience, Caroline, who's behind the scenes, is from the UK and spent some time in Brighton last summer.
Oh, okay. So that's when I was there.
Yay! And then last summer I was in the Cotswolds, and then we went all the way down to Rye, which is kind of
right
east of Brighton.
Yeah, my sister actually just moved back to the United States from many years in the UK, and she was still there at that point. So it was a legitimate research trip, but I also scooped up my sister and brought her with me.
That is so fun. Oh, I love that for you. So hanging on to the Regency setting and the modern sensibility. So how do you get that balance?
I don't know. I'm always bad at answering craft questions because I'm not a very self-aware writer. I just kind of see what comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I went into it knowing that I was going to be okay with a lot of the things that Regency romance gets criticized for. For example, a lot of handsome, emotionally intelligent aristocrats who are single at the same time and are, friends, who have good hygiene and nice teeth and things like that. So I just kind of stopped caring about that kind of stuff. But I cared very much, and I'm sure there are mistakes, but I cared very much about the world building, I guess, about the material world building and the norms of the society. So, they're quite concerned about social ruination that might stem from this ill-fated elopement, things like that. But I guess by sensibility, I mean the way they treat each other, the way they express friendship and love, and some of the larger issues that they're dealing with. Archie, the hero's mother, has what we would recognize as Alzheimer's. It isn't named that in the book. Archie himself has what we would recognize as dyslexia and ADHD. They're not named in the book. But modern readers will recognize some of the situations and problems that the characters face.
I love that. So, Robin, since you did kind of a reality show reboot, did you binge any reality TV shows to like get yourself in that frame of mind?
Didn't. I listened to so Rachel Bilson has a podcast about her time on the OC. And so I did listen to some of that to refresh myself. And so I feel like there's been quite a bit, if you follow gossip closely enough, about the people that were on those shows over the years, that I could use as inspiration. But I kind of just dove into it. And it was also my first time writing on a contracted timeline, which is a horrifying thing to discover. But it felt very crunched. So I just kind of went for it. I just went for it and hoped for the best and researched when I felt like I needed to. And otherwise, you just get the product of my mind.
There you go. So, Robin, so this is the first time being contracted. What did that change the way you write or the way you wrote this book? Did you do something different than you had done for your previous work?
Oh, it was very different. So for my first one, which was what I used to get my agent, I started it in December of 2019. And then wrote most of it sitting in the hallway outside of my kids' bedrooms at night, after I put them to bed, because they were still in the mom's in the hall phase. It was the pandemic. There was nothing to do. And so it took me about 18 months to write that. I did an outline. I just kind of wrote what I felt like writing, and I wrote it out of order. And I would also just not open it for months at a time because writing a book is hard and I didn't want to. And I get very in my own head. And this one, I had to outline because I had to submit an outline to get approved. And I did not have time to not write. But I think I also learned a lot from this one. So I now love an outline. I hate making an outline, but it makes life so much easier. And there's still, at least with my editors, quite a bit of flexibility in how the book turns out versus like that initial outline that I turned in. Like we ended up rewriting the whole second half of the book, changed, I think. So it was definitely very, very different. This is actually the first time since I got my agent, I guess in June of 2021, that I haven't had anything contracted. And it feels very weird to be in like this liminal space of like I'm working on a proposal, but nothing is actively happening. It's very strange.
Yeah, I bet. That's a different frame of reference. So, Jenny, Robin opened the door with talking about outlining and things like that. When you're working on for something contracted, is it different than when you are writing on a project that's not yet sold?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Similar to what Robin said, I find that I've gone through some phases with selling books. The last couple of projects I've sold, I've written the entire book, which I haven't had to do. Like I'm at the point where generally I can sell on a proposal, but I have written the entire book well, that's not true. I wrote like 80% of Earl's Trip, and my previous book I wrote all of. Because they were kind of like we talked earlier about books of our heart, like every book can't be books of your heart, but these were books that I just felt like I was going to write no matter what, and I might as well just finish them. And they came rather easily. So and that's kind of representative usually of I'm writing this book because it needs to be written, and I'll worry about what happens to it next. But then when you sell the book, in my experience, I'm often selling more than one book. I kind of like to sell two, but often you're selling three. And for those you're writing some kind of blurb or proposal. And I always know what I think I'm going to want to write about, but it doesn't always necessarily turn out to be exactly what I want. My publishers are all great. They are flexible. But what I'm getting around to here is you have to kind of commit to an idea. And to me, the hard part is not the outline, like what's going to happen, but the emotional conflict. Like what is going to keep these characters apart and how is it going to get resolved? And I hate having to articulate that before I've started a book. That's something that usually kind of emerges as I write. Having said that, if I get it right, which I don't always, the book is easier to write. Like for having done that work, the book is usually easier to write, but I don't like doing that work and I will only do it when forced to.
Okay, so a couple things. First of all, let's go back to your previous book. What's that called?
Canadian Boyfriend.
And who narrated the audiobook?
Oh, Joshua Jackson, Pacey Witter. Yeah.
And it's so good. He does so well. Like you don't know what you're gonna get.
Pardon?
You don't know what you're gonna get
With
the,
a
like
narrator. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was like, man, I hope he's good. And he was great.
Well, I know. And it started kind of as a joke, like the the audiobook was produced in-house by Hachette, who did a wonderful job. And they said, any thoughts about narrators? And I said, all right, what if we get a literal Canadian boyfriend? And, ha, 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 ha. And they actually got him. But it was during that actor strike. So I like to think that it kind of worked in my favor because none of them were allowed to do any, on-camera work for studios.
Right. That's great. I wonder if more people took advantage of that and we'll see that in the future. And Ella did a great job too.
I know. And I feel bad because everyone talks about Joshua Jackson and then she gets kind of, pushed to the side, but she was wonderful as well.
It was so good. I mean, again, for the audience, I'm a Minnesota native, so I lost my mind during that book because it was like I have been to all of the places. So the sense of place was very important to me. Okay, so thank you for letting me do that digression.
Yeah.
You're talking about having to do that work to make
Right.
to figure out the emotional tension, the emotional conflict that's going to work better. So for both of you, when you're coming up with that, and again, it's a craft question, and you may not love talking about this, but are you sitting at your desk thinking about that? Are you walking a dog? Are you sending the kids to school, making a grocery list? Like, does that happen when you're in a intentional place, or does it just show up? Let's start with you, Robin.
I would say once I'm stuck on something like that, it haunts me. It's just with me all the time, whether I want it to be or not. And I like it that way. I think because then the ideas just pop up at random times. And you're like, oh, yes, that will work. Like that's the solution to that problem. And if I'm really stuck, then I run it by my writing group or by my poor husband who has to listen to all my what if I did this ideas, which are chaotic. But yeah, it really, really sticks with me.
How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I think it's all the things you said. I try to, when I'm writing a book on spec, when it isn't sold, I just start writing before I worry about it. But if I'm proposing a book, I try to sit down and do it, and it works to a certain extent, but I also need the idea to kind of simmer, and it does that while I carry on with my life. So all those things, walking, showering.
Yeah.
It happened, driving the carpool, like all of that.
Yeah. For both of you, when you're writing, do you feel more comfortable sitting down in front of a computer and writing? Do you take notes on your phone? Do you write longhand? Do you leave yourself voice notes? What do you do? Jenny, let's start with you.
Sit at a computer and write. It's the only thing. I've tried dictation and it doesn't really work for me.
How about you, Robin?
Yeah, I also sit down, usually not at a desk though, like anywhere other than where I do my day job is usually my move. And then I often take just like short creative notes. I have a notebook per book. And I'll make like little notes in there about changes. The book that I'm proposing right now that I've written the first almost half of, I actually have an Excel sheet, which is new for me, to keep myself organized and like write down changes I would like to go back and make. And that it makes me feel real professional, let me tell you.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's always interesting to me to hear how authors track their progress and their changes. Some are very, very intricate. Some are on a, post-it notes. Do you ever do any of the post-it notes on the wall with the different colored post-it notes and stuff like that? Either of you?
I've bought the post-it notes like 3 times, different post-it and pens, but no.
Yeah, I keep a guide to a book as I'm writing it that's in another Word document, but it is a table. It's just like a simple table. So it's not really a spreadsheet that keeps track of chapter numbers, page spans. I'm not really obsessive about chapter length, but I don't want to have a 7-page chapter and a 45-page chapter. And whose point of view it's in, if it's a dual point of view book, what's happening in the chapter, and if I'm being good, which I am usually not, like what is the point of that chapter? Like why does it even exist? So then I can go back, I can skip things, but I know where I need to go back. Or when I'm revising, I can say, okay, you just had 7 scenes from the same person's point of view. Maybe you need to revise that, or etc.
Yeah. I noticed Vivian, thank you for your comment in the chat. Jenny, she says she loves Canadian Boyfriend.
Oh, thank you.
And then Robin, she said she's so excited. She's just added your book to her TBR.
Oh, thank you so much.
Wonderful. So thanks, Vivian. So for both of you, how did you always want to be writers? Is it something that came to you after college, before college? How'd you get there? Let's start with you, Jenny.
I wanted to be a writer when I was a little kid, and I wrote a lot of stories when I was in elementary school. But I never entertained the idea. I entertained the idea of going into journalism, and I did some journalism in high school, but then I realized that that I liked writing, but I didn't like asking people questions that they perhaps did not want to answer. We had some controversy at our high school. We covered a lot of controversial issues, and it stressed me out a lot. So I went on a whole other career detour, but eventually found my way into a career, like a day job career as a writer, not of anything like this. So that's kind of what started me out on writing. I didn't ever aspire to write books in a serious way. I just got to the point where I was writing all day, every day for my job, and I was reading a ton. And eventually I went, oh, how hard can this be? It turns out that was my moment for the Greek gods to smite me for my hubris, because it was really hard. But I kind of put the day job writing and the love of reading that had always coexisted together at some point.
Got it. How about you, Robin?
I grew up in a house of readers, and so I've always loved books, and I've always kind of in the back of my head thought it would be so cool to see my name on the spine of a book on a bookshelf. And then in my 20s, I published a couple personal essays, and that was a good feeling to be published. And so I thought, like, one day I could do a novel. And so I started, I don't even know. I can write the first 10,000 words of anything. And then I just, then it gets hard. And so then I would give up. And then I had just gone back to work after my mat leave with my daughter. She was about 7 months. And I was reading a lot of another author fairly local to me, Kelly Armstrong. And she was doing a workshop in my town. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll go to that. Not because I care to write, but just because I'm interested in how she writes. She seems like a cool person.
Yeah.
And I ended up meeting a couple women at that workshop who I really liked. And the next day they emailed me and asked if I would join their writing group. And I was like, yeah, I need friends. 100% I will join your writing group. But then that meant I had to write something. And that became my first published book, Reasonable Adults. So I owe them quite a bit, because it's really just because I wanted friends.
I love that. That is the best.
It's really hard to make friends in like your mid-30s.
right?
I like where do you I don't want to hang out with the people I work with necessarily. Um, and like I love a mom friend, but I don't know. If all we have in common is that our kids are in the same class, that's not always enough.
No, you're exactly right. And I've even in your 50s, it's very like I've made a new friend in the past 2 years who's become a dear friend, but like that first part of it is very,
Yeah,
you have to be very vulnerable
yeah, it's
to
tough
do that.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
And
I'm glad that those friends helped you out.
I need
me
to go
too.
tell my son to stop playing his saxophone. Please hold.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to keep talking, Robin, because that's like the joy of everything is trying to balance everything. I love this. It is the best. We've had
Oh,
like escaped animals, we've had loose children, we've never had someone playing the saxophone.
that's amazing. I left my house. I'm at someone else's house right now because I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and it's bedtime over there.
And exactly.
Can't be
And that
there.
comes into play. That
Sorry
okay,
about that. He arrived home while I was on, and he knew I was on, but it didn't occur to him to not
but that's
bust
lovely.
out the saxophone.
It's like
Yeah.
saxophone. That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
We were envious of that. But Robin, I was admiring the chair behind you. I was like, that
I
chair
know.
looks super comfy. I hope you write in that.
I've never sat in it, but I might
Well,
after
try it on
this.
your way out the door.
I will.
So, for both of you, you do write romance. Do you have any favorite tropes or tropes to either read or write, or least favorite tropes? Jenny, you want to go?
Yeah, I love enemies to lovers.
Absolutely.
I love it. I um, find it hard to write, and I think a previous editor of mine said that I do a very good job writing enemies to lovers adjacent, and I think she's right. Like it's hard to write, but I love reading it. I also really like friends to lovers they are if we see them become friends on the page. Not so much a fan of like they were always friends and suddenly
Yeah.
something changed. I think those are my top two. What do I not like? I mean, there's exceptions to everything, right? But I feel like in our modern world, secret baby is hard to get behind,
Yes.
right? Like, why would you
I'm
not?
typing it in right there as you said it.
That's actually my agent who's
Yes,
typing
it
that in. Hi,
is.
Courtney. Yeah, no, like, why would you forego years of child support from the billionaire who, impregnated you unbeknownst to him? No. I mean, there are exceptions, I'm sure that I could find a secret baby that I loved, but
So, side note on that, we have a quarterly romance book club, and we were talking about our least favorite tropes, and my brain got scrambled, and I said fake baby.
fake baby.
And everyone was like, what? I was like, no, no, secret baby. But it was like, how's a fake baby gonna work? Anyway, Robin, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of want to go read it. It's a fake thing. Um, I also really love Enemies to Lovers. I also, um, I read Catherine Center's Happiness for Beginners a couple of years ago, and now I really love the younger brother's best friend trope as
Fair.
well. I think she did that so well. Um, and I think, yeah, Secret Baby is a bit much. You know what? I really used to dislike second chance romances, and then I just wrote
Mm,
one. And now
I don't love them either.
yeah, I think it really depends on the circumstances for me. I think maybe I've just been reading the wrong ones,
Well,
but
and I don't mean that I loved your book. Your second
hey,
chance is great, and there are some that are great, but I don't love second chance. But that's like I think that's just a character flaw in me that don't. I'm not big on second chances in real life, so I don't like
yeah,
to read about
right.
them either.
I would find it challenging to give someone a second chance.
So
But
exactly. So I do love some fake dating.
Me too.
yes,
I'm a huge
And
fan of
I
the fake
think
dating.
like marriage of convenience in a
Yeah.
certain, especially in historical, is kind of a variation on that, I feel like.
Yes. Yes, exactly. As long as there's still some agency.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I need. So side note, Robin, Catherine Center is from Houston, is a dear friend of the store. She's here all the time. And her new one is really, really fun. The
oh,
Rom-Commers, which comes out in June. So
I love her so much. Please let her know. Big fan.
I will tell her. Have you read the Bodyguard?
Yes, I think
So
that was
the
actually my first. I think I read the advanced copy of The Bodyguard. I think that was my first Catherine Center, and then I just went on a binge for days, and that was all I was reading was Catherine Center.
That's so satisfying when you get a binge.
Oh, I loved it.
Like Jenny, when I discovered you, I went on a huge Jenny binge. It was the
Oh,
best.
thank
It made me
you.
really happy. I loved it very, very much. But yeah, so Rom-Commerce is set kind of in the world of Bodyguard.
I'm so excited.
It's great. We loved it. It's really fun. I'm trying to think, let me think of, oh, so we talked about that. I'm going through. So you both of you said you have day jobs, you write at your computers. If you get writer's block, what do you do?
Feel
Me,
sorry for
I actually
myself.
don't have a day job anymore, but I
Okay.
did have a day job for many years.
Okay.
Writer's block. I'm gonna sound like such a jerk for saying this, but I don't really let myself get writer's block. I let myself like not write very much. I let myself write words that are bad, but I think I spent so long. Um, my career started when I had a day job and I had an infant. And I spent so long seizing whatever little moments I could.
Mhm.
Like I laughed, Robin, at you writing a book in the hallway. Wrote an entire book in front of Blue's Clues in like little 15-minute increments. And I used to have a 45-minute lunch at my job, and I would physically get up and go to a nearby public space and write. So I got very used to just like having to write when I had time, and I think that actually was served me pretty well. Um, I'm not a fast writer, but I am like a plodding button chair writer.
Yeah. Well, and once you get something written, you can edit it and revise it.
Right.
I think that's when a lot happens. Hey, can either one of you talk about what you have coming up? I know that Robin, you have something that you're writing. Can you say anything about it, or do you still want to keep it quiet?
It's not sold, and I think I'm just gonna. It's similar to my other work. It's like a women's fiction with a bit of mystery and some romance. It's all the things mashed together.
Awesome. Well, I'm sending you good vibes for that.
Thank you.
And Jenny, you've got Earl's Trip too.
Yeah, Earl's Trip 2 is going to be called Manic Pixie Dream Earl, and it is coming out in June 2025. It is about one of the other Earls, people who've read this book. It's about kind of the comic relief sidekick in Earl's Trip. But before that, in January 2025, I have a book coming out called Into the Woods that is the takes place in the Canadian Boyfriend world. It's about a dance teacher. If you read Canadian Boyfriend, it's about Gretchen, the studio owner, who goes to is sort of the artist in residence, or one of the artists in residence at a summer camp, an art summer camp for kids, where she encounters a semi-washed up rock star who's blown his career to smithereens. I don't know if that's a trope, but I love me a rock star romance.
Oh,
So
yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
so they're having like artistic crises of confidence in the woods. That's
Okay.
January.
Thank you, Courtney. Courtney says rock star romance is a trope.
100% a trope. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, can we find a rock star to narrate it?
Well, it's funny that you say that because the audio producer for Canadian Boyfriend was just wonderful. Like, and aside from Joshua Jackson, I felt like they did such a good job with the duet narration, like stitching it all together. Those two narrators were not in the same studio. They were
Isn't
in
that
different
amazing?
cities. Yeah, I know. So I kind of jokingly said, what kind of like 1990s rock star can I think to ask? I mean, it's a joke, but so was Joshua Jackson.
Oh my God, there's a
So
long
I'm
list.
soliciting. I'm taking suggestions.
That's actually kind of a really cool hook to it.
Yeah, I doubt they'll go for it, but you never know.
Oh my God. Like so I sit on an exercise ball when I'm at this desk and I am now like, oh my God.
But the other problem is a rock star is not necessarily going to be good at narrating a book
No, no,
like an
no.
actor would be, right?
We could find a literary one.
Yeah, or like all those rock stars who have bands on the side, like Keanu Reeves, also a Canadian, sort of.
Keanu Reeves.
Can we manifest Keanu Reeves into it?
Yeah. You should go for it. Let's do it.
Okay. Keanu Reeves will narrate Jenny's book
Into the
coming out
Woods.
in January. Keanu Reeves will
Okay.
narrate Into the Woods.
All right.
There we
I'm
go.
all for it.
There we go. It's done. Oh my God. I would just completely lose my mind. Okay. So we did that. You've got that coming out. There was something that you guys were talking about that I got so excited about. And it's gone. Oh, Robin, have you been to the Bahamas?
I tried really hard to convince myself that I could justify a research trip, but no, I visited via the internet, which
Okay.
less good.
Yes, but maybe you can do a follow-up research trip or something.
I would love to.
It's so beautiful. I mean, I've never been, but just like seeing the pictures.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on websites where you can peruse private islands for sale. It's good. It's a really fun time. You should do it.
It is not a bad idea. That would be kind of cool. Maybe I could find one with birds. So we're coming to the end of our time, and I'm so grateful to both of you. My heart is so full. This is so fun. Canada to Texas, getting this conversation done. But we always close with what is a book of your heart? So, Robin, let's start with you.
Sure. I love Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. It is such
Oh,
a warm, wonderful story. I
mhm.
laughed, I cried. I I think I literally hugged the book when I was done reading it. Um, yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So many customers have said the exact same thing.
Oh, it's so good.
How about you, Jenny?
Um, so when you said, first of all, I appreciated that you asked for a book of my heart because the sort of what is your favorite book question is difficult. But book of my heart made me sort of think about books that have stuck with me, books that kind of made an impression on me when I was younger. And what popped to mind was 15 by Beverly Cleary. It's the age 15, but spelled out.
Oh,
Um, it's old, we were just talking, I couldn't remember when it was published, but apparently it's from the 50s. So it was old when I read it. Um, but it's about a girl named Jane who has a little romance with a guy named Stan. Um, and it's just, I haven't read it for probably 20 years. Maybe it's terrible. Oftentimes these things don't stand up, but it's about her first sort of tentative steps into this romance. And it's just so lovely and sweet. And I remember when I was that age reading it, just sort of pining for something like that, and there's one scene at the beginning, she's babysitting. It's very like mid-century. She's babysitting and she's wearing a little skirt, I remember. And her babysitting charge is about to pour a bottle of ink, you can tell it's mid-century, on the white carpet. And he's delivering the food. He's a dog food deliverer or
yeah,
something.
he's
I
a
don't
dog
know. It's
food
very
deliverer.
yeah. So he's comes in and sees what it's about to happen and sort of distracts the kid. And like, speaking of emotional intelligence, Stan, the dog food deliverer, had a lot of emotional intelligence.
Did.
And then they end up going to like a prom like dance in the dog food delivery truck.
Yeah.
I mean, what more do you want?
So the thing I would say, and Caroline, okay, Viviana has read it, Caroline has read it. Yes, he speaks Pig Latin to distract the kid.
Yes, I forgot about that.
So the thing I would say is that Beverly Cleary knew how to get to the emotional heart of something in a timeless way. Like, look at Ramona.
Right.
Ramona, like, still stands up all these years later.
Right.
I have to hope, because I haven't read, I think I reread it about 15 to 20 years ago. I'm going to reread it, and I want to see if it held up, because I love that book. Like, at the end, when she brings the flowers and they're huge, and someone says, oh, that's like Burnham Wood, and there's some new book, like there's a book club at the store doing the new book Burnham Wood, and I was like, oh my gosh, 15 when she's bringing the flowers.
Yep. Yeah, it probably is very sort of like, the dating culture probably feels very old fashioned, but I agree with you. I feel like the like emotional truths and the intentions of the characters will endure, I would imagine.
Exactly. I mean, she's just, man, she was such a talented writer. I like, in children's books, look at that. Something Beverly Cleary did beautiful was that she understood that being a kid was hard. And that absolutely shone through.
But I
all of
just
them.
thought 15 was interesting because it was YA. It was different than the Ramona books. And I don't know that she did any other YA, but
I think she did. Did she do the other one, or is that a different author? About the girl who like went from Oregon down to California for a school year.
if she
and
did,
was-
I don't know it.
I'm gonna have to look it up, and maybe she did do the sister wedding, but I'm gonna look this one up and figure it out, and I'm gonna email it to everybody who registered, so y'all know you do not need to listen to me flail verbally and try to remember this. But thank you so much to both of you. I'm so
Thank you.
grateful for your creative endeavors. Not how I pictured it. Earl's Trip, both available at Blue Willow online and at your favorite indie bookstore. If you have one nearby, please support it or order it from the library. Let's get these 2 books out into as many hands as possible. So thank you again. Thank you to everybody who watched. Jenny and Robin, I cannot wait till the day when you come to Houston and we can welcome you to the shop. It will be a delight.
That would be great.
All right. Y'all take care of yourselves. Be well.
You
and we'll
too.
see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.